Cool.
Happy New Year. Welcome
Year.
to 2022. How you guys doing?
Yeah, we good.
Happy.
Okay, well, I've had some time to think, and so it's not really a gripe, but what I wanted to discuss today is work, life, love, family balance. And we're in a world right now where it feels as though it used to be split by genders, which I'm not going to get into today unless it comes up naturally, in terms of somebody going out and working economically and some person looking after the family. But if we separate the gender thing, that was the division. Whereas now it feels like everybody's prime focus is to go and make money and get economics and get status. And that seems more important than family and love many times. And I find that curious because most people, when you ask them, they say, oh, I don't want to go to work today. And no one says, oh, I die for my job. Very rarely do people ever say that. People say they die for their family all the time. And so when people say they die for their family or they take a bullet for their family or whatever, they do anything for their family, how come it seems that the push from society, the consensus seems to be at all cost, go and be successful, go and get as many, things to your name as possible, gather as much resources as possible, get as much status as possible. And this is a big, I suppose, broad conversation then, because what is the downside to that? What is the negative things that come with making work the primary focus at all costs? I must be rich, I must have money, I must have status, I must have fame, I must have clout, I must get attention, more importantly than anything else. And especially when those crossroads come up, when there's direct decisions to be made about, do I choose family life? Do I choose career? A lot more people tend to be choosing career right now. What do you guys think? And where does that take us as a society and as a group of professionals?
Yeah, that's true. I think there's so many, individual reasons as to why somebody might do that. For example, they're not in a job which helps them live the life that they want to live or prepare the life of their children that they thought they were going to give their children, and the state of the economy and pandemic and all of that is you can accidentally do too much to try and create resources for your children and your family. I say too much, and I mean that in a very, very broad opinion type sense. And that comfort, and it's different for lots of people. Some of it is, I don't know where my next meal's coming from. And there are more food banks in this country than there have ever been. So that is a completely different, I suppose, situation. So some of the drive is going to, for those ones, it'll be slightly different. Yeah,
because I don't want to, that is a different situation, to be honest. And if it's needs must, if you're doing it for your family, of course, there's no debate there. I guess what I'm talking about is the mentality that says career first. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying what are the negative connotations to how society has pushed that as the be all and end all for many people. That if you don't have status, you don't have money, you don't have resources, you're nothing. Whereas you might have a happy family, but you can't, it's harder now for someone to say, I'm a housewife, than it's to say, well, I own a company, or I'm a house husband, or I'm a business person doing well. Why has it become much more popularized for it to be success, achieve?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in there. I think what Jankee said can't be discounted. Obviously, people do it for those reasons, and people want to hit those lofty goals for those reasons. I think as well, we've kind of all been fed this idea that, oh yeah, you can do this and achieve this by this age, and this is where you should be. Everyone should be here. Some of this stuff has come as well from like the previous generation as well. Able to get houses by a certain age, able to get married by a certain age because financial circumstances are different. Obviously, circumstances are a bit different for us now. Cost of living is sky high. So there's that disconnect from where you should be to where you actually are. And I don't know, sometimes that's a hard gap to kind of mentally try and bridge. So you think, okay, you know what, I've got to work harder. Everyone's got to work harder. You've got to hit those goals. You've got to have your house by your mid-20s. You've got to, really kind of hit all of those goals. And it's tough. Everyone's running their own race, the different set of cards they've been dealt. it is really difficult and can have a very detrimental psychological effect as well. But yeah, just a few initial thoughts.
Yeah, and so both of you have done, I think, the sensible thing in give the logical reasons why someone might place value on it. But we also have a more vain, pretentious, and what negative does that do? Where somebody, again, might not want to come out and say, my goal in life is to be a wife or a husband, to be a family person. That's not attractive anymore. It's not sexy. Whereas it might be is to make loads of money and to be really famous or to be really visible. And we see people doing things purely just for that. They'll take money, and I see it as, it's like rent seeking in economics, where suddenly you're not doing anything that provides value to anyone else except for you getting money. And now people are a lot more, I would say, self-serving, individualistic, rather than I want to do stuff for the greater good of society, for a family, whether that's partners, whether that's children, whether that's your own parents and siblings or your local community, whatever you'd call that family sense. Whereas rather than doing things for that now, it's more about how can I raise myself up? And I'm saying, as much as you're right, sometimes that comes as a consequence of noble ambition. There's also the side of it now where it's just about me, me, me. And how does that impact public life, professional life? When people are in jobs for themselves and not really trying to contribute to that workplace even.
Well, that's a different conversation. I don't know. For me, that's slightly different. But where you go back to that vain selfishness type thing, a lot of us get our value from how other people see us. And if we're fed that having, and this happens from a very young age, when we're at school, I've got the newest trainers, I've got the newest this, so I'm going to get my hair done here, all of that. I don't know how you break that cycle ever, and how you don't change that when you become an adult, when suddenly you've now got money. You might have even got a house, a mortgage that you now have to keep up with, and that's going to drive it's a horrible circle, vicious circle. Now you've got all this stuff, you've got to try and maintain it, and then you look at people next to you and you're like, oh, that person's got that, I want that too. You're always looking at the group of people above you, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think it's a vicious system.
It's a consequence of everything.
Yeah.
The social media, you can see the best version of everything from across the world. Whereas if you was in a humble village, you saw your humble village. Now you can see the best all the time. And I know you said it's a slightly different conversation, but I think it does have a knock-on effect on business and professional life, because if you have a lack of contentment in you and a lack of resilience in you to work for a purpose, whether that is to support your family, so I'm going to keep my job, whereas now it's more like, I'm just going to quit. This doesn't serve me. I'm not getting any glory here. And so it's like everybody wants the glory all the time, and that can create different issues. Some of that, again, is fine. Sometimes people just have good ambition, but sometimes it's, I can't stick to this because I can't see how it benefits me individually. Whereas people used to have careers where they stayed in one job, and I don't know whether it's good or bad, but they had a focus on, I need to do this to support my family, to support my community, to do my part. In some countries, they still do national service and things like that, where you give a whole good portion of your life to communicate, to contribute to society. And it's not about you at all, it's about national service. And so I think we've gone so far from that you go to a point where if I don't benefit from this day's work, I question myself why I do it. I'm not motivated to do it.
No, I definitely think you can see that in all of the things that we are fed around us.
Do we contribute to that as business owners and as professionals ourselves in making it feel like work is more important than anything else?
Yeah, I would say so. Sometimes anyway. It depends on, I mean, you always want to impress the importance of a task or getting a thing done, and you never know the extent to which people are taking that, deep into their consciousness, if that makes sense. You get people that start staying late, doing over hours, arriving as early as possible, all hours under the sun. And when I've seen that in the past, rarely ever have I ever seen a manager or boss or whoever discourage that. Say, go home, unplug. I mean, when it gets excessive, when it gets too much, yeah, sure, but rarely ever, rarely ever. Usually it's that type of behavior is encouraged, is rewarded, it's looked upon favorably. So in a very brief answer to your question, I think yes, generally speaking, maybe not individually. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, but generally speaking, yeah.
That the sum of all the different parts is creating this hyper, I can't think of the word, there's a hyperness to people to need to be at the top of every totem pole, to be visible. And if all else fails, you can go and get your social media page and get visibility that way. And it's like, if you're not doing something that's visible, like there's a lot of snobbery even amongst even business owners. It's, well, why are you working a 9 to 5? Why are you doing something you don't need to do when you could be doing it yourself and you could be more successful and you can have a second income stream? And of course, there's always the balance of when people just need the extra money, of course. But there's also just I think there's an insidious nature of people just need to be at the top of everything all the time and be at the front of everything all the time, at the expense of the things that if you ask most people what's really important in life, they would never say those things. But all of our actions seem to be headed towards those things. If you ask most people what's important, they'll tell you family in some sense, even if they mean their best friends, because not everybody's nuclear family is what they'd want it to be. But some sense of family would be what they say is important.
This is why I can't disconnect this particular question. It's not completely vain. Some of it would be, oh, I want to genuinely achieve this, that, and the other for family, for, you know, for future goals for kids, for those people around me. Some of it is genuinely like, you know, altruistic, rather than vain, or rather than something that we are fed. But I mean, it all kind of comes from the same like capitalist machine.
Yeah,
it kind of feeds you this thing of, well, it's twofold. First of all, it's, you need this, but it's here. You know, forever. You look at the cost of
dog eat dog.
For example, the cost of living versus how much people are getting paid as a wage, and how that gap keeps on rising and rising. But not just that in terms of the need sides, it's also the want side. You know, you've got designer brands that are built to market, not to the people that actually can afford it, but to the people that's just out of their affordability. So, I mean, it's all part of this insidious, well, capitalist machine, really. It's crazy at the moment. And, you know, how do you stop it?
So that is the question then. So to turn it around and to do, because as we've described already, it's so vast and it's in so much part of society. How do we, or how does anybody as a responsible business owner get their business needs met without contributing excessively to this thing that's happening to the world? How do you get that balance? That's where we'll leave it as the resolution that we can find. What would you suggest we can do?
As people in charge.
As people in charge.
I think we've said it in a previous podcast. It's knowing why it is you're doing what you're doing. So the person in charge will always have their own goals and ambitions, and ultimately the company ends up being the vehicle for that person to get where they want to get to. But the reason they started the business, and what purpose are they serving, what were their goals, and aligning those with the duty of care they have to their staff, like it's a balance that we are constantly trying to strike. It's really, really difficult to do it. But if you have moments where you go back, maybe once a year, you start the year with, am I treating everybody correctly? Are my policies going to support the family, the ideals that I have, that I can then project onto others, or maybe others can benefit from? Maybe you have like a stock take, and so that, because it's really easy to get caught up in the spiral and to want more, to want the next thing. So I think you have to take stock somewhere.
I kind of like what you're saying there about keeping your own company values. How does that translate into promoting the idea that people should have their own values as well? Not you can teach people what their values should be, but allowing people the opportunity to keep the important things important in life.
But that's your culture, isn't it? And that's if you as a company, every year you're going to do this little analysis, and that's one of the things that isn't coming out, it's a creation of a culture. Do I have flexible work policies? Am I allowing mothers to pick up their children, or fathers? Is my maternity the exact same leave as my paternity? Because it usually isn't. Women get more. It's those sorts of things that you start with, and then you feed that culture instead of feeding the other culture that everyone else is being hit from that capitalist machine.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the culture thing. I remember the most valuable or the CPD that stuck with me the most. Like, I think, to be honest, this was even when I had my own department at the time, and it was not really anything to do with the work. It was more like a self-analysis. It was more a
Yeah.
case of this guy came in and it was just so different, so refreshing. And he basically said, you know, what are the things that you want to do? What are your goals? And it might have seemed by the end of it, you know, you got a lot of people that are walking away and they're thinking, oh, you know what, am I in the right place or am I going in the right direction? And da da da. And to be honest, as a business owner, that might seem counterintuitive because then you've got staff thinking, okay, well, am I in the right place? But actually,
Yeah.
I would say that's exactly what you want. You want your staff to know that they're in the right place.
Yeah.
And you want the people whose values align with the values of your company. So I think it is all about the culture, definitely all about the culture. And another way you can spread that is even in your meetings, your one-to-ones, you know, it's not just a KPI thing. It's like you take stock and you also say to people, you know, what do you want to do? You know, where do you see yourself going? Okay, maybe we can look at getting you a role that is something a bit more aligned to your skill set, something a bit more aligned to what gives you a bit more drive and enthusiasm.
Before I get to the last question, there's a word you both used, maybe in a slightly different question, but I actually think underlines the whole thing across the board from what we're talking about to the whole society problem. It's value. It's where do you place value? If you place value in just money, in just likes, in just materials, like Jankee's talking about what you've seen from young, then that's what you're going to think you need to get to. And so maybe it's both what you're saying in that culture, it's putting value in everybody, in the people. If you put value in the people and they realize that I'm valued even in this role, as long as it pays me enough to get me through, which hopefully you are paying as a good company enough for people, that might keep that person in that role for as long as they get value from it. Whereas if you only have value in the managers or the CEO and directors and only have value in the big deals that get money across the table rather than the person who actually makes your customer feel good or whatever it might be, it's about where we place value. And at the moment, the world puts its value on some weird stuff. It puts its value in likes, puts its value in a picture, it puts its value in things that often aren't even real. And so maybe there's something important in terms of how you as a company direct people's value and also what you put value in a way that's clear to everybody. So I suppose if I frame the question that way, what's a radical way and what's a reasonable way that you can put value in the people and steer it away from sort of a capitalist view of who makes the most money in the company and who's the most visible in the company? Because we can only control what happens at work. We can't control what they do with their life. So what would you say is a radical way of bringing that in and a more reasonable way of doing that?
At work.
At work, yeah.
No, I thought we were going to start a revolution.
No, let's frame it into work. That's why
I was going to jump on
directed that question a bit more specific.
So radical is maybe say, you've got your one-to-one, you're sitting there opposite Jim and you say, you know what, I think you need a sabbatical. You need to get away from all of this, take 6 months, completely unplug, go somewhere, remote.
Bit of constructive dismissal then, Charlie.
I mean, I didn't say that you can't time that meeting very conveniently, but you know, you're also saying, look, completely unplug, find out what is important to you, and then come back to us and see if this is what you want to do, and you know, you're going in the direction you want to go in. Basically, in short, suggest massive and drastic change to someone, change their environment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fairly radical.
Would you say it's a more reasonable approach of getting that idea of value across in important things?
So we started this in some ways, and have done it, is to create your company ethos. A lot of people have statements and stuff, but it's to actually align it with strategies that help you meet your ethos. So if you have got flexible work policies or you don't have flexible work policies, put them in place. Encourage them and encourage people to use those. And you can do that in a controlled way that doesn't affect your business, but does also open up opportunities for people to consider what they want to do with their life. It is all a culture thing. I think you're never going to get that straight away. It's got to start from your policies. It's got to build into your management. Do your management understand, or do you actually understand what you mean by the culture? And then are the actions you're taking aligned to those ethos statements? And that's hard to stay on top of as well. So you have to have points where you go back to it and revisit it.
Okay. So it's getting an ethos within the company and getting people to review themselves sometimes out of it, both quite drastic. So yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we can start a small ripple that starts to change and has people feeling a bit more community-based in future. But yeah, thanks for that. That's helpful. I'll see if I can do my part.